Another video game one. I wanted this channel to be about variety, but all it seems to be about is Jeremy Corbyn and video games. So, that's what it is. Relentless collectible tat, endless enemy strongholds to clear out, radio towers to climb, hack or burn, and some sort of enhanced vision mode to help out the stupid. All of these tiresome tropes are the unmistakable mark of a Ubisoft game. Tropes that have now made the French publisher and developers' titles tedious and beyond predictable. It's no secret that Ubisoft swaps and shares its game mechanics between its studios like they're at an over 40s swingers party, and ever since Assassin's Creed released in 2007, each one of Ubisoft's games has carried the stench of the one that came before it. Assassin's Creed's towers and Eagle Vision found their way into Watch Dogs. Those towers ended up in Far Cry 3, whose enemy strongholds also turned up in Watch Dogs. Then Watch Dogs' third-person shooter mechanics ended up in The Division. Meanwhile, Far Cry Primal reskinned some portion of Far Cry 4's map, despite being in a different location and different time period entirely. Even open-world driving game The Crew managed to shoehorn in that radio tower mechanic in some ass-backward way. All of these games then had a smattering of pointless collectibles sprinkled throughout them that ultimately amounted to a whole lot of nothing besides a trophy pop. These additive mechanics make for tedious work. All they do is give the player more to do, more to check off, and more nonsense to deal with that adds exactly dick to the final product. It's all inconsequential filler that makes Ubisoft's game feel more content-heavy, when in reality they're just a hollow copy and paste experience. From Ubisoft's standpoint though, this approach is understandable. It saves time, it saves money, and it puts that undeniable Ubisoft signature across all their products. Really, it's just good business. What it holds back though is the ability of their games to develop any kind of singular identity. It means Ubisoft titles get lost in a sea of beige, where any glimpse of imagination gets drowned in the off-white magnolia undercurrent. It makes the games forgettable, and that is something that no developer should ever be gunning for. The Division was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. I couldn't take Ubisoft's nonsense anymore. Not only was the Division taking cues from other Ubisoft titles, but it was ostensibly derivative of other games that existed outside of Ubisoft. Its MMORPG tendencies were ripped straight from the likes of Destiny. The post-apocalyptic narrative, although interesting at times, felt like subpar versions of Fallout or The Last of Us. The Division suffered some major identity crisis as it tried to pull together two very disparate ideas with very little cohesion, all whilst trying to squeeze in some fucking Uplay perks. After playing that trash and forcing myself to review that hapless game, I swore myself off Ubisoft for a while. I'd been fed their tasteless gruel far too many times, and it was beginning to make me gag. But, as the great Bob Dylan once crooned, times they are a-changing, as Ubisoft is doing something that AAA developers seldom do. They are listening. It's taken some time and some mildly insulting memes, but Ubisoft are finally listening to their fans. They appear to be making games now that have their own personality and do not have an array of radio towers that would rival the likes of SETI. And this turnaround, well, it all began in late 2016 with Watch Dogs 2, a game that took on board what its predecessor had previously laid down, stripped it back, lightened it up, and gave us a game bursting with anarchic fun. Ubisoft didn't take itself too seriously with Watch Dogs 2, often poking fun at themselves, openly highlighting and mocking how kitsch they'd become. There was a brilliant self-deprecating self-awareness shown throughout the game from Ubisoft, and it was genuinely refreshing to see. They simply took the building criticism on the chin, rolled with the punch, and fired back a sublime counter in Watch Dogs 2. Fast forward a few months, and it was For Honor's turn to step up to the plate, Ubisoft's first heavy hitter of 2017. The game's build-up had all the telltale signs of a typical Ubisoft oversell. The trailers were hot, the gameplay looked almost revolutionary, and the decapitations got people worryingly excited. Surprisingly enough, it was not an oversell. Ubisoft actually delivered what they promised. For Honor's battle system was innovative, intuitive, and some bloody good fun. It was entirely sure of what it wanted to be and kept the game simple enough to carry that message through. Yes, it fell short on the single-player campaign in terms of narrative, but in terms of function, that campaign served as a perfect primer to the core experience of the game, the online multiplayer. Once again, it was simplicity that was the key to Ubisoft's success. They stripped away the fat in Watch Dogs 2, avoiding all those filler mechanics. They kept For Honor simple in its narrative reasoning so they could hone in on the thing that mattered most, the gameplay. And a month later, it was the turn of Ghost Recon Wildlands, another open-world co-op third-person shooter in the Tom Clancy series. Worryingly, judging by what the trailers showed us, its gameplay style looked uncomfortably similar to the Division's piss-boring affair. Fortunately though, there wasn't an awkward loot system nor radio tower in sight, and gameplay felt a far sight better than it did in The Division, despite its similarities. It was nice to actually make a headshot and see its effectiveness. It was far from perfect though, criticised for repetitiveness and a somewhat laborious mission structure. Wildlands did find praise though, in how each of these missions could be approached from a variety of explosive perspectives, an aspect that softened the tedium of it all just enough to deem it a success. Sure, it may have stumbled, but Ghost Recon Wildlands just about stuck the landing. So what do these 3 releases mean for Ubisoft? Right now, I feel like this is a refreshed, renewed Ubisoft that we're seeing. One that has come to respect a game's singular identity over a company-wide one. Sure, there are still a few issues for them to overcome, like their god-awful UI design. But what we've seen from Ubisoft in the past 9 months speaks to something quite impressive. Progression. They are acknowledging their pitfalls as a developer and are making a discernible effort to address them. They are beginning to seem like a big AAA company that is less focused on the business side of games and more focused on the artistry of them. It's almost unbelievable that just 12 months ago Ubisoft had lost my support entirely, and now just after 3 game releases, I find myself genuinely rooting for their integrity as artists. Ubisoft's next 12 months will be the real test though, and it will be their time to prove that this just isn't a flash in the pan. Just last week they announced their intentions to release Far Cry 5, a new Assassin's Creed, The Crew 2 and South Park The Fractured Butthole within the next year, and right now I'm cautiously hopeful that they can pull it off. Firstly, South Park is a dead cert. Matt Stone and Trey Parker take their work very seriously, and the multiple delays in this game are proof that they are once again hellbent on making a fantastic game. So there is no worry on that front. It's the other 3 that have a point to prove though. Far Cry 5 has to pull the franchise out of stagnation. Far Cry 4 was just a reskinned Far Cry 3, moving the series on in only the tiniest of increments. Yet if the rumours surrounding Far Cry 5 hold any water, then the franchise could be taking a very interesting path toward the American West. If this is indeed true, they would do well not to tread on the toes of Red Dead Redemption 2 though, especially one set in the same time period. The new Assassin's Creed also has a similar challenge ahead of it, to reignite the dying embers of the franchise. The annualization of Assassin's Creed did it no real favours, keeping the gameplay in stasis since its first iteration. Ubisoft had the foresight though to just leave it the fuck alone the last year, letting the game simmer in development and hopefully come out on the other side not feeling like 2007. And by all accounts, it might have worked. Rumoured to be living under the title Origins, this new Assassin's Creed is supposedly a prequel, and is undergoing a complete mechanic overhaul to bring it more in line with its modern counterparts. And as for The Crew 2, well, that game has the hardest job, trying to pull off a genre that was only relevant on the PlayStation 2, and doing that on the back of a game that was unanimously accepted as a bit shit. Good luck on that one, lads. Good luck. Best of luck. So as it stands, all signs do point to a cautiously optimistic, yet challenging future for Ubisoft. The famed developer and publisher seems to be making a shift in the way it develops games, and is actively trying to improve itself with every single release. But time will only tell if this shift is going to be a positive or negative one, and whether or not it will actually stick. There is no doubt that all eyes will be on you at E3 Ubisoft, especially mine. So, no pressure lads. No pressure. Done. Hey Square, Tenor, IO Interactive, Hitman, worth how much, right? You ever done the thing where you fold across the Queen's eyes?